Welcome, friends, to another edition of Cert Corner. This it's funny. I was personally beefing with ISACA for a little while. They were trying to say, "Hey, listen, do you really mentor?" I was like, "Hey, do you even know me anymore, ISACA?" But sorted that out. I'm taking another one end of this week around AI, so we'll do a Cert Corner there. But today, I wanted to kick it old school. The CISM, one of the flagship gatekeeping certs that you see on a lot of folks' job specs, because it's shorthand for be good at cyber. So it takes away the onus of a hiring manager to actually know what the heck they truly need and maybe, go through the nice framework and figure out some skills. But full disclosure, it has been 8 years since I sat for it myself. Obviously, I've kept up on the CPEs, but a lot has changed, obviously, in 8 years, both in cyber, both in how ISACA wants to target or position this certification. And so we'll kind of get into exactly what's up and coming for the CISM. I wanted to do, now that I've gotten back in good books with ISACA, I think we're going to do all the ones that I've taken there. There's a bunch. They're throwing out more for AI, but today it's the CISM. So what has changed or what's coming up on the horizon? This is something I didn't know before I did the research for Cert Corner. I try to bring the goods here, Alyson, for our listeners. They're going to flip the script completely November 3rd. So there's going to be a new edition coming November 3rd. If you're scheduling it now and you're studying now, obviously the resources out are going to cover you. But know that if you're starting to get into like that Q3, Q4 timeframe, you have to make a choice. My personal advice will be, if you can get it done before the transition, get it done. Because one thing you find out the hard way when it's a new cert or it's a new edition of an existing one, there's not a lot of material out there that's going to be there for guidance. You'll have the official body of knowledge from ISACA. They're really good there. The test bank questions that they provide are excellent. I didn't do a course, I remember, for the CISM. I just bought the book and the test bank, so that, back then, probably I was out like $150. It was probably, I want to say, the only thing that was affordable about the process there. ISACAs are known. They know what they're selling you because, again, it is up there with the CISSP as one of those flagship, hey, mama, I've made it mid to senior level type of certifications. It requires the 5 years. As with many of these certs that require the 5 years, you can slough off a little bit with some education, some other certifications, but at the very least, you're looking at a good solid 3 to 4, I'd say, years of verifiable experience at a bit of an advanced level. And I will say, they check, they verify, they reach out, they want to make sure that it's gatekeeping. I mean that in both a good and bad way. I'll be honest. Some of it's a little bit too gatekeeping in the negative sense, but it's also, if you have it, the thinking is you can run a team in this space. And they keep it very high level where you can run a team. I didn't say IR team, I didn't say GRC team, even though it's an ISACA cert, right? The CISM is aimed at you're at that mid-manager tier. You're running a function, or at least a sub-function that supports a broader capability inside of an InfoSec program. So it's coming. It's changing November 3rd. You're working now.
Just one thing about that.
Sure.
So if someone is not a good test taker, though, I would think the recommendation would be wait. Because if you study for version 1 and you don't pass, then you have to now study for version 2 if you don't leave enough time, and then you're starting all over. So
that's a great
just
point.
know yourself when you're studying.
Absolutely. So yeah, because you will not be able to take the old version once that November 3rd timeframe hits. You're going to have to get back out there, and then you're relearning a whole new body of knowledge. And that's another piece that's changed. They've really reconfigured the balance for the body of knowledge. It's much more, or they will, right down the road. That November 3rd change comes, and it's 3% is roughly the running of the team, so running a program. And then Another 23, I think, or 25% is going to be incident handling. So a huge chunk is you can run a program and you can respond to an incident. Now, again, it's not necessarily the in the weeds. How exactly would I contain something, or how exactly would I identify anomalous behavior? How would I contain it? How would I eradicate it? How would I bring everything back to normal? It's not necessarily that level of depth, but it's how would I run a team that does that? How would I then prove that it's been done to the level that our organization promises that it'll be done, whether you're in a highly regulated area or you're just making promises in terms of service level agreements to your partners regarding breach notification or incident handling of that nature. You can run the team that gets this done. On top of that, as I mentioned, a big chunk on program management, which it's great. I think it was kind of implied when I took it that it was a little bit of kind of program management. I remember studying about, well, what the heck is the difference between project management and program management 8 years ago, and then kind of getting into the differences there. But other than that, it's really the positioning that I can tell from what ISACA is trying to do. It's trying to keep it relatively at the same sort of, you're a manager, you're running a team. You're sitting there and maybe reporting up to directors. You are a director yourself, or you're reporting up to the board, depending on the size of the organization that you're running. But this is not your Sec Plus level. I wouldn't even say like CISA level. This is really, for the folks that have some direct reports, are playing in the realm of metrics and proving value and getting ROI for what the program activities are doing. As I said, reporting out to the board. Some of the stats, though, were pretty astounding to me, Alyson. Didn't know that about 107,000 people have this at this point.
Wow.
That number was a lot less when I took it. Again, it was 8 years, so good on ISACA. I remember back when I took it, there was discussion, as there is still today, CISM or CISSP, which one? But I remember the discussion being tinged a bit more on, will the CISM even last? What's going on? The CISSP is going to be the way. As my answer to many of these types of which cert to get questions is going to be get both. If you can afford it, if you can figure it out, there's things that I remember studying for the CISM definitely helped me study for the CISSP. There's a lot of overlap there. I see now with where they're going in November, trying to maybe shift out of that overlap a bit more to then produce something that ISACA can reliably market as, you need this in addition to, or this fills a different niche than the CISSP. That's not to say ISC2 won't, as all these test makers are doing, you have to go through the cycles, you have to re-up what the domains are and the weighting among those domains, as I mentioned, for the CISM. But it's still there. It's still one of those kind of prestige ones. I remember even recently searching for, what can I get beyond a CISP or beyond a CISM in terms of specialization or, super running of a program, or, maybe like at the director level and above there. And I feel there's a gap. There's, manager, and then not too much for like directorships, and then CISO, right? It's kind of like, you have your EC Council and your Carnegie Mellon type programs that are more geared towards definite, chief risk or chief information security officer type stuff. So, maybe, I don't know, ISACA, if you're listening, maybe there's something there. Maybe there's a space. ISC2 has the specialization track after the CISSPs. I know those are a bit outdated. I heard on the grapevine that they're getting looked at again and maybe freshened up. So there's manager level there, architect level, and I think there's a third one, specializations for the CISSP. But for here, once you get this out of the ISACAs, Alyson, I'd say maybe this one's the most widely known in terms of like running a team. I've always considered the CGEIT, right? The governance of enterprise IT as more of the hardest one or the broadest one that ISACA has. At this point, I'll come back and probably let you know when I take one of the AI flavored ones this Friday, whether that's the case or not. But still, CGEIT is a bit more niche. It might be considered more like, well, this is the tops of the top for governance. If you're in the governance space, I'd highly recommend that. I've seen directors, in governance gravitate more there. But honestly, I don't see it being taken by as many folks. Still, 4 domains, 150 questions, get 4 hours. It's not graded the same as a CISSP, meaning, and you probably know like the technical term here, given past history, where I call it dynamically graded, where if you're doing amazing by question 100, you're done when you take the CISP. Here, that is not the case. They want you to take the full 150. So, pack a lunch. 150 questions is a bit of a marathon. 4 hours can be, absolutely a bit of a marathon.
All
And I
multiple
think,
choice?
yes, it's all multiple choice. They kind of played around, I feel, with some more scenario based. But they've never, to my knowledge, really gone into the, practical side of things. They want to hit you with, here, how would you run a program? And that's really the biggest mental conceit when, and it's the thing that I'm even boning up now as I gear up for a fresh one from ISACA on Friday. Think like a manager. So if you're on the fence and the distractors really sounding pretty feasible, you're not sure which one is the key, you're not sure which one the answer is, and you're going, it's taking a step back and going, how would a manager in your group make the decision here? So it's not necessarily like, in the response to an incident, hey, I'm going to, this is the classic example given. Incident happens. What's the first thing you're going to do? Depending
It's
on.
not freak out, right?
Exactly. Listen, that's internally for sure. And,
Yeah.
sit there and just stress eat.
But not in front of your team. You may do it
No,
internally, right?
You got
but
to
not.
sweat. You got to
That's
sweat
right.
behind closed doors. All right. Like a good
Go to the
peer.
bathroom, scream for a second,
Exactly.
come back,
Just,
get your team
have
in place.
a pillow
There you go.
of sadness and just go, well, there it goes. There it is. I thought I was going to have a good career and there it went. Oh, thank you.
Well, it's all in the resilience and how you recover. And
it's really at this point now, as we're seeing, even just with like how the insurance industry is changing a little bit. It's assuming that things are going to happen and bouncing back.
That's right.
You're absolutely
That's right.
correct. But in terms of the classic example with the incident, depending on your background, if you're coming from more of a technical hands-on blue team sort of stance, maybe the first thing that comes to mind there is, well, we gotta isolate, we gotta contain, gotta make sure this thing doesn't spread. Not a bad answer. When it comes to like the risk manager in me would say, absolutely. We're going to kill as much of the blast radius as possible. There's less chance of stumbling into a place where I have to report a breach. There's less chance where I have to start sending I'm sorry letters, either email or paper wise to folks. Yes, contain. Then we go in and we crush. We try to find, the root cause and then make sure we're good. In this context, as with, I would say probably all of ISACAs, because I'm getting the same advice for the AI one I'm taking this week. It's no. Is there an IR plan? Follow the IR plan. Which again, if you're coming from a purely managerial standpoint, that makes sense. It's you have an SOP, follow the SOP. I've seen, and I'm trawling Reddit to get ready and finding posts that I found to prepare 8 years ago. Same posts are there going, I don't understand it. This makes no sense. Why would but containment is going to be in that SOP. So what are you doing? But again, it's the mindset of coming at it like a manager, like you're running a team, like you're going to be reporting on things versus actually doing the containment yourself. That's the mindset shift that I have to get kind of back into, because as one's career can do, it can take many trips and turns, and suddenly you're more hands-on than you thought you would be, or less, as the case may be. But I remember.
That's such a great tip, though, for that exam, right?
Oh,
is remember the role you're to be in when taking that exam, because that will help color the flavor of what those responses are as to which one's most appropriate or the best answer in that scenario.
It's not, and that's really, I remember it's been a minute. The last ISACA exam I took was, and this one's not doing too well is kind of what I'm seeing, because I'm just not seeing it on many job specs really, but the CDPSE, sort of like their answer for data privacy when IAPP was getting big. So I think ISACA was like, hey, wait a second. I like that one because I feel like it was kind of a good mix of like technology centric stuff. It opened my eyes to, obviously privacy as its own distinct sub flavor, and having its own tech stack to worry about and vocabulary and kind of, rules of the road to learn, which was exciting for me at the time. It was like, oh, this is neat. This is cool. It complements cyber, but it's something different. So it's still kind of fulfilling in that knowledge gainy way. But if ISACA exams are as they were then, the distractors can be pretty distracting. I remember where a lot of times, more so than for a lot of other type of even multiple choice exams that I've encountered, flagged a lot. There's a lot of times are 2 to even 3 of the question of the potential answers were like, wow, this could all, wait a second, what are you doing? I'm usually okay if I can get them down to 2. I'll still flag and come back, as you said, as you've kind of educated me on. Later test questions shouldn't inform previous ones, but
Correct.
that's a little game that I like to play because they still do.
Right.
It's just, that's
Well,
the break.
if they're not doing the ISO 17024,
Exactly.
it's going to happen.
Exactly.
That just means they're not looking for what we call enemy items in the certification, which is where one answer from one, even taking the SAT, I would look for those, right? You would back in the day, right?
No, flagging was my friend. I stand up a little straighter in my chair, or sit up a little straighter in my chair when I see that flagging is not an option. I go, okay, folks came to play. This is okay. We have to, I should have prepared better. There's a couple recently. I forget exactly which one, but there was one I've taken, I want to say like inside of these 12 months where I sat down and I was like, oh, we can't flag. Wait a minute. For that very reason, right? Because then it throws off also like my approach to I speed run. I flag what I don't immediately just in my bones know the answer. And then I go back with knowing that I've done the rest. I can focus on, and sometimes maybe, that out of 150, I'll flag like 30 or 40 sometimes. And then once I know, okay, cool, I have 3 hours for 30. Oh, this is not, so then I can go back and really deconstruct and then I'll do another pass. But thankfully, knock on wood, they haven't told me, my internet research hasn't told me that flagging is no longer allowed. So that's good. I'm also of note, I think, is ISACA's finally embracing remote proctoring to a certain extent. Now, this
Are they
is
still
something
using
that
Pearson VUE or they use somebody else?
I believe they use Pearson VUE. I think that's
Okay.
kind of what I'm setting for. I haven't gotten the email yet. No, it's Pearson VUE because I remember scheduling. It was. I remember the color scheme of Pearson VUE. I know. Like, listen, and it's especially, and this is something I definitely wanted
Cut that
to get
face
into.
out of that.
No. Listen, you're not wrong. And me as
I've just heard so many complaints about it. That's
as a
all.
habitual test taker, I definitely wanted to get into this because for a couple of reasons. I remember during COVID when obviously going in wasn't an option. And I was really thankful when, your ISC2s and your CompTIAs, I remember, because it's funny. I remember the last day I went in when they shut down work, when they said, stay home until we figure this whole COVID stuff out. I took the CISA. It was, and I remember I was in person and I had to walk across. So I really didn't factor in how far away it was. I was like, it's in the city. It's not that bad. How bad could it be? Oh no, I had to walk across Times Square. I'm like, this sucks. Right. There's Spider-Man and there's this weird disease going around. Like, what's going on? And Spider-Man's looking a little handsy, right? Like I was, he's notorious. The Spider-Man down there.
Usually it's Elmo.
That's what it is. It's Spider-Man and those two. And it's something about
It's the red costume.
It's the red costume. And it's like, okay, buddy, like I got my hand right up by my jaw here. Like, let's not play games, right? Let's just look away. I'll look away and we won't, do the whole New York non-eye contact, right? Like, so I remember that. But after that, it all obviously had to be remote proctored. ISACA tried it for a little bit and apparently they got so many, they were able to identify so much cheating that they straight up shut it down for a while where you could not go remote proctor for an ISACA. So you had to go on site. And then I remember going for the CDPSE. I think I had to go out to Connecticut. It was a haul. It was a pain. the
Wow.
travel, I think, took me more than the friggin' test. But
Yeah.
they're doing it now. However, something to note was only for certain countries. They don't allow remote proctoring in certain regions of the world. I didn't get into exactly which ones, but I was like, okay. However, doing even more follow-up research, apparently the proctor crew for ISACA exams is notoriously terrible. I usually do a little sheet across my work setup. I'm ready for that, but I'm also ready potentially to get challenged on what the heck is this? What the heck is that? Because it's a thing. Like for some reason, not for some
I've
reason, it's
heard that.
obvious. Like ISACA has told them, hey, be tough because we want to protect the integrity, and they're very keen. I remember that during COVID being like, well, I'm not taking any more ISACAs because we just can't go in, and they got rid of remote proctoring. So, I remember I wanted to get all of them at the time, and I had to kind of hold off on, I believe, the CGAIT and the CDPSA until we could go back and we were allowed to go back in.
I can tell you over the years, I've heard a lot of the challenges people have had with proctoring, bad proctor experiences, we'll say, because the only way where I was previously, the only way we offered them, everything was remote, but we didn't use Pearson VUE. We used a company called
Certiverse.
and they were able to 24/7 for the most part, anywhere, anytime. And though you had to put in a secure browser, and the way that we were able to identify cheating, and I can say out of say 500 people, I think we had one incident, and that was it. That was hard stopped, right? And I think we had one other where they heard something, like a proctor heard something, so they stopped, and that kind of scenario. And the guy, the person was just like, "Yeah, I dropped the pen." It was something innocuous, but they weren't able to identify, and so it ceased, and we
No, I'm not
gave them a chance to do it again, right?
sure.
But
And I
overall, they
remember I've
didn't have that
taken,
same hard line that a lot of them
no,
do.
I've taken both, and I can say I'm much more of a fan of serve versus approach. I also remember one of the ones I took was there was like something about like the login, and I was freaking out thinking I was going to lose my thing. And I think, reached out to you helped me out, and then we were able to get it all squared away. That whole experience was still miles ahead of, like, I'm getting ready. Everyone says when they do the remote proctor stuff, like, hey, you can't read out loud, don't look away, and it's not like I've gone in intentionally going, let's see what I can get away with. But there's certain times where like I'll hear a noise upstairs, my kid's running around or something, and I'll be like, and I haven't gotten dinged. I'm going in to Friday with the mindset that is just not going to be acceptable, because the horror stories I read about, again, I get why. I do, but I can say firmly, it is giving me more trepidation than the material.
Well, it causes the anxiety. And that's what a lot of people, like test takers, had reached out saying, do we have to take this remote at the prior company? I'm like, well, that is how we offer it. That's how we're able to keep it actually more affordable, right? Because we were doing
Exactly.
much less expensive certifications.
Sure.
But they were, like I said, the one time that they weren't sure was a knock on a door and somebody being called to dinner. And so they literally brought the wife in and was like, she's like, no, really, I was calling for dinner. I couldn't tell you what's on your screen if my life depended on it. And they were able to continue forward, right? So it was like an easily resolved, hey, we heard a noise kind of scenario. But I've heard that kind of leeway isn't necessarily given with some of the Pearson VUE ones, that it is a bit harder of a line.
And definitely,
like, no noise.
Yep. And Pearson VUE already, like, again, has that reputation. And then I'm expecting even like, turn the draconian notch up a couple of turns, because it's Pearson VUE in support of ISACA. Again, understand why. I know they're trying to protect the sanctity of course, what these certs mean once you get them. So they're, you can't cheat your way to them. But won't lie to you and say that that's not something I'm preparing for. I made sure I cleared out big time on my schedule, making it bright and early so that there's not even the possibility of, what I'm worried about. Again, I'm going to shut everything off, but like I'm worried about like a phone call, like, nature of a cyber
Because life
job.
happens.
Something
right.
happens, what's going on. The baby will be home, thankfully. And so it's not like she'll be out and about and we might get a call from the in-laws or whatever. But preparing there, so TBD. I'll let everyone know. The last thing I wanted to just, close out on, because this is always something that's, well, why get this one? Why not get another one? The two that I've really seen brought out as equivalencies. One is ISACA's own offering, the CRISC, and the other one is, of course, the ISC2's CISSP. As I said earlier, I'm going to say get them all. Get them paid for sure, right? Have somebody. These are not cheap exams. They're up there in the $700 to $800 range, just straight away. Exam wise, you add any official preparation material, and you're looking at $1,200, $1,500, sometimes $2,000 and above, depending on where you get your prep material. I remember I bought a book. I bought two books. One is the official guide from ISACA. They're very well done. And the official practice exams, practice questions. Those are extremely well done. Again, they'll be hard to get, probably, I would imagine, or hard to vet, I should say, when the new exam format comes out. I'm positive ISACA is going to have them ready to go November 3rd, just because, it's a good way to make money, good way to prepare as well, right? It's, one hand washes the other. So, they're not cheap. I say get them all for sure. When I look at the CISM and I look at the CRISC, I'll do that one first. Believe it or not, what's crazy to me is that, I do this obviously for a living, risk management. I'm in GRC. The CRISC was the hardest one I took out of all the ISACAs. You wouldn't think, but it's in the name. It's the risk one. Yeah, it's the one I scored. I still passed, thankfully, first time, but it's the one I scored the lowest on. And I'll always remember that. We're going, wait a second. I personally think it's because I started getting into the mindset of we do it this way at where I work. And I didn't take my own advice and say, what is the exam? What is the ISACA way of handling risk? Right. What is the ISACA way? So that's another thing I would go back to, understand CISM. It's how the ISACA, what's the ISACA way of managing an information security program? That I think is also the differentiator between the two. CRISC, you're much more, I think, in the weeds. You're being more of an analyst, not auditor, because that's the CISA. That's their flavor for auditing. But for the CRISC, you're definitely there going impact likelihood, and you're coming up with hopefully some sort of quantification or qualitative measures of what risk means at your organization. In my opinion, you have a CISM would run a team of CRISCs or CISAs or even CDPSEs, right? CISM is meant for the person kind of running that show. Brings me to the last, I think, comparison, CISM and the CISSP. For my money, I think the chief differentiator is the CISSP is going to teach you about the field. It's the classic mile wide, deep. In recent iterations of the CISSP, it's gotten a little deeper. They've kind of reconfigured the mix of domains and the weights of the domains to, I think, allay some of that criticism. I don't think it's a criticism. For a field like information security, it's good that you have very well-known exams that say you got to touch it all, at least have some sort of passing knowledge of how broad this thing can be. If you were to ask me, and that's why they don't, I think, they go, throw PhysSec in there, throw more ITOT in there, throw some AI in there, which they are. They're that one they're doing. Throw more in there because it's just so incredibly broad. More IAM if you want to get a little crazier. Access control, throw some cloud in there. I know that there's specialties that especially even ISC2 does offer, but I would say go broader because I still think it's my only contention with the CISSP is I don't understand why it's like the one that, hey, this is at the 5-year mark. I don't quite, if you're going to go that broad, I think you should pull it back into hey, 3 years, right? 2 to 3.
I was going to ask you why that one has a 5-year if it's such a broad, that I'm not saying it's like Security Plus. I've not taken any of these, but to me, Sec Plus is a very, how far can you go as far as a general overview of understanding the landscape?
Yeah.
And it sounds like CISSP's more advanced version of that same.
That's pretty much what I would say. I would absolutely, you're spot on. I've taken also the security, they call it Security X now. CompTIA, what are you doing? Just, that's an aside. But when I took it back in my day, it was the CISP. the Advanced Security Practitioner, the CASP. For me, CASP and the CISSP, very similar. And if anybody at my job is listening, well, why do we pay for both of them? Because I like taking them, and it's good practice. All right, folks. But it's, again, very broad. The CASP, what it had going for it, in my opinion, was also, it was on that tip for the CompTIA, where they were bringing in more practical PBQs. And here's the thing. The implementation was awful because it's very hard to do practical anything in a proctored or like controlled setting. As you know, it's exceedingly difficult. Yeah. Now on the other side of things, I have a bit more patience for it. But I remember when I was taking them, those things would take like forever to load. Obviously, my counter's counting down. I'm going nuts. These are like the last 10 questions that I got to do. I have great time so far because, for me, it's about passing and also passing and how short of a time can I do it. So you're killing my stats here. But that's that. The CISP, broad, it teaches you, you touch on a ton of different parts of this field. I would still say, in my opinion, the CISM is purposely built for how would you run a team of CISPs. Maybe your CISPs would be your architects or your principals or your level 3, 4 type folks on your team. But the CISM is still firmly positioned as
Management.
How would you then get all the pieces to kind of orchestrate. And again, I'm not saying take one over the other. I'm a big fan of both, but I wanted to put my 2 cents into the raging debate that still seems to go on of which ones. I'm not saying either one's better. They're different. They're built for different things. So a lot of changes for the CS. Yeah.
As you get ready to tie it up, I genuinely want to know, for you who does manage a team, but you took this 8 years ago. So what value have you, because it has been so long, and I know you've kept up with your CPEs, but what value did you find as a result of going through that experience for CISM?
For me, it allowed me, and that's a great question. I was totally going to not talk about how it touched my career. I was going to get us out. That's why
I was stopping you. I was like, don't end this before you tell them why this matters for you and how it helped.
No, for sure.
Or didn't help.
No, I feel it allowed me to see maybe like 2 feet further out in front of me than just what I was tasked with at the time. For sure, I was an analyst, so I was getting tasks, I was executing them, wasn't calling my shots. It was, this is what you're working on, this is what we need. What it allowed me to understand was that none of what any function does is done in a vacuum. So it was telling me here, my governance work, my contract risk work is supporting potentially incident response. It was the first thing that really started putting the pieces together to see how that was actually the case. If we have good contractual controls, then obviously there's probably some service level agreements that you have in those contracts where then we can expect and demand faster reaction times from our types of partners. If you make sure that you put the 72-hour breach notification and you fight for it as a contract analyst to make sure that it's on the paper that binds this agreement, then you're setting up your SecOps folks and your IR folks for a bit of an easier time when they go, hey, it's almost 72 hours. We need to know, or else you're out of compliance, and then suddenly we can start yelling at you and we have more leverage versus it's the right thing to do. Please give us notification. Well, sometimes your partners aren't going to, this is not the right thing to do, vil or .com. If you have it so understanding different pieces, like, hey, this is why we care about phishing click rates or failure rates, because it supports incident response in XYZ fashion. Or this is why making sure that we have MFA across as much of our organization as possible is not just a gaudy stat to have to report to your leadership chain, but it's going to reinforce the governance, because we can then say, hey, only the people that should have had access to something have it, and my IAM team has the logging and can prove it, or can pinpoint where somebody was trying to circumvent that. It started putting those things together, and in my opinion, I think it made me a better team player, because then I didn't just automatically think what I was doing was the only thing that mattered. I started seeing how the pieces fit and how sometimes governance has to take a backseat to IR because IR is the thing that we're doing right now because there's an immediacy and a active threat. Or IR and governance have to take a backseat because IM has to get figured out because SSO matters because we're trying to onboard this partnership. And so how can we best support them? And understanding how the pieces fit, let me see the spaces where maybe, hey, if I do this, this, and this, that'll set up these teammates over here to be a bit more successful. I feel I didn't realize that it was doing it at the time. But looking back, that's absolutely the path it set me on.
I was going to say, it sounds like it's your little hero story of breaking down silos and seeing the bigger picture.
Really,
Kind of the beginning of that journey.
Yeah, it really, it made me think that there was a formalized way to do so. Because trust me, before I was just like, am I just being weird? You know, should I just keep the blinders on?
Yes, but that's a normal thing every day.
That's a different thing. But it was really, yeah, truly. Anybody that's worked with me for like 10 minutes understands that it's a resounding yes of an answer to that question.
Weird. It's okay. That's why we get along.
No, for sure. It was that one there. And again, it didn't formally say that at the time. That's where I think the one place where maybe, again, 8 years ago, it would have been better to have that kind of put in my face a bit more. And that would also then be something that I'd say, hey, ISACA, you should probably advertise this because I think it's a really great for like program management, definitely obviously for leadership, but even, like there's tons of the program manager role, I think has really exploded on a lot of security teams and having, maybe tagging this as, hey, this is the natural thing to support that, whereas now I think a lot of folks, even in the security space, go, okay, I'll go get something from PMI or I'll go get something from Scaled Agile, right? Or Scrum.org. And I'm not knocking those, but like they're not program management specifically for cybersecurity. I feel like this cert is probably a key component and should be on there. And it's funny because I don't see it on a lot of job specs specifically for program managers. I don't quite get what the disconnect is. So ISACA, if you're listening to this, maybe there's something there because I think there is honest, true value there.
Well, I'll say that's the same disconnect as to why they asked for CISSP for people with 2 years experience. I mean, it's because the people writing the job recs aren't necessarily people that understand the jobs or the alphabet soup or what pieces go to others. So I'm with you. I think there is an opportunity for ISACA to market it better to organizations, saying if you have a team and you have a management team for your program, this is the one to help you vet this and making sure, like, hey, make sure they have that checkbox, the verification, right? The little checkbox for it.
Yeah,
not that we're trying to gatekeep more, but
no, but if you're gonna gatekeep, at least have it make sense
at that level. Correct. Well, because that's the higher level. You're running the program, or you're managing the program. So you've got to get the soldiers in place and in the right direction and all facing the same way and following the SOPs and creating them.
Yeah, and making sure what you're doing
earlier.
I'm
like, you're assuming there's SOPs.
Yeah, that's a whole, but hopefully, yeah. But as we both know, and anyone who's been in this space for more than 10 minutes understands that it is a big assumption.
It is. It is. I can tell you I've worked for enough organizations where they couldn't spell SOP, never mind have one in place where you're like, hey, why are we doing it this way? We should just have a book with the answers of the basic things that we should all be doing and how to handle these situations so that we're not revisiting the same thing. But that's a whole nother conversation. So
that's a tough conversation right there. I think we should probably mark it.
Well, it is. And we can add that as a tough conversation as to how and why and how to do it. But as we end this one, are there any final thoughts on CISM and kind of where it's going and things people should be looking out for and value? And
again, if you can afford it, if you can get somebody to pay for it, I think it's a worthwhile endeavor. This is one of those where, having taken it back then and taken a bunch between then and now, I still go back and say that the material there, I think, prepared me to start making 1 + 1 = 3, or at least start thinking in that way, which has served me very well in terms of running lean programs that extract a lot of value out of processes that are just arranged in more logical and self-sustaining ways.
All right. Well, I think we'll end it on that.
Sounds good. If there's any ones that you want us to get into, please reach out, not saying that I won't then point to the comment section and tell my wife that, hey, I must take this. The fans are asking it, but I won't say I won't do that either. But
So help a man out, y'all. Just put
exactly.
in the comments what
Right.
you
Let
want to
me
see
know
next.
which ones, the streets is asking for. You have to do it, right?
We're
But
just enabling you. This is like a bad drug habit at this point.
1,000%. It's definitely
Except that it's education, so is it bad?
I just pick the weirdest things to obsess over because, again, as my wife says, it's like when you make the arguments, you're not like technically wrong,
Right.
but it's not, it just doesn't, it's not right for us now. But you're not technically, you make good arguments because you're making sense. But yeah, if there's any that you want to see, let us know. We're also happy to invite people on to do a Cert Corner as a guest if there's one that we haven't dived into. Happy to do that. I'm thinking of maybe the OSCP. There's a couple people that I know that have taken that. I haven't. Might be something to break into next. But until then, of course, as always, keep it cyber metal. Take care.